Warning. This podcast contains true stories that are not intended for those missing a sense of humor. Any resemblance to actual events or allegations are purely coincidental. Before listening, please relieve yourself, as possible adverse effects include spontaneous bladder leakage, mild hysteria, and sudden release of dopamine. Names have been changed to protect the innocent and guilty. Everyone is innocent until proven guilty, Karen. Welcome to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacy Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. In this podcast, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria come together to share unique perspectives, engaging dialogue, entertaining commentary, and funny stories for those working in the healthcare industry. And now, here are your hosts, Tony, Stacy, and Victoria.
Hey everyone, and welcome to the Coding Consultant Confessions podcast. I'm Victoria Mole here with Tony Elholmes and Stacy Buck. And today we're going to talk about stress and burnout. So employee burnout can lead to a lot of lower levels of confidence. It can diminish your teams, your employee engagement. It can have a negative impact on your job satisfaction, in employee retention rates for sure, for customer relationships, for overall success. There's actually a study from Indeed that says that 61% of remote workers and 53% of on-site workers now are finding it a lot more difficult to unplug from their work when it is non-work hours. And according to a study from Gallup, burned out employees are actually 23% more likely to visit the emergency room. And I think those of us that work in healthcare know that emergency room visits are not cheap these days. So anything we can do to reduce having to visit the emergency room because we're having symptoms that may sound like something that's more, severe, that we might be having so much stress that we're having chest pain or having very intense headaches, that could be something that could be very serious and it would lead us to go to the emergency room. The interesting thing too is that according to some of the studies that we've seen from the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, 11% of U.S. employees are actually working more than 50 hours a week at their jobs. And on average, we spend 40% of our days dedicated to our jobs. That actually places the United States towards the very bottom as far as work-life balance when we compare ourselves to more developed countries. We're working a lot more hours than some of our developed counterparts. So let's talk first about kind of identifying some of the things that cause us to be really stressed out, really burnt out. So, Stacy, what are some of the things that you encounter a lot that kind of cause you to get to that point where you're like, oh my God, I'm done. I'm completely burnt out?
Well, thankfully for me, I'm kind of over the burnout phase of my career. I'm a little bit older than the other two ladies, so I've been doing this a little bit longer. And for me, it hit many years ago, and so I've adapted my business to where I will not burn out. But I used to be that person who, when I first started my own business, I would work 50, 60 hours a week. I was also very involved in my professional association, always doing volunteer work. It was from morning until night. It was constantly something about work, or it was work related. And I was very stressed out. I was very miserable and just burning the candle at both ends. And it's not a good place to be. And for me, life circumstances forced me to change my ways, because in 2010, I actually got very sick, mystery illness, didn't know what was wrong with me. And I spent months and months and months in bed, and I was not able to work for the most part. And that was kind of an eye-opening experience, because you have this idea before you're in a situation like that you have to do everything. Things will not get done if you don't do them. Yet when you find yourself in that situation where you can't do them, you manage and you find a way to still accomplish what you need to. My business that particular year was busier than it had ever been. I had more work than I could handle. And it was the absolute worst time for something like that to happen to me. But in that process, I had to adapt my business and change my business. And then I relied more on the people working for me to deal with a lot of things that I used to handle, and then just get the work done on a daily basis. So while that was a horrible experience that I went through, it went on for a really long time, but 8 months of it was really bad. I would never wish on my worst enemy what I went through. On the flip side of it, when you come out of a situation like that, you look at life differently, because you aren't able to do anything. You're not able to function normally. You think that there's the potential that you may not live. I got to the point where things were so bad, I wanted to die. Like literally, I felt like that was the better option for what I was going through. So when you come out on the other side of it, you start to reevaluate where you were at. And so for me, when I started to feel a little bit better, still not having answers to what was wrong with me, and then I met somebody, I started dating, surprisingly. I met somebody came to my house to do work for me. And that's how I met this person. And then we end up, dating, and I would have never thought that would have happened during that time. And when I was feeling, good enough to leave the house and do things, I didn't want to work. So I checked out of my business and just let other people handle it. And I just hit a point where I'm like, I don't want to go back to who I was and how I was before that happened, because your life can change overnight in an instant, and circumstances can take a turn for the worse. So once I came out of that, I went from one extreme to working all the time and putting in all those hours and being stressed out and miserable and unhealthy, to now I never want to work, and I'm delegating like everything, and I'm just like checked out and not even really engaged in my business. And so I went through that phase, and then I'm like, okay, how do you find the balance in that? So it was really going forward, how do I want to run my business? How do I want to conduct things? And when I came out of that, then my business had a very long downturn for several years. I had so much momentum that had built up, and then I lost it by being so checked out for all that time. And it was a struggle for several years. And then finally, I just decided that I wanted to work less and make more. That was my goal. I didn't want to go back to how I used to live my life every day, miserable. And people didn't like being around me. I was a miserable, nasty, horrible person, angry 24/7. I was not pleasant to be around because I had so much pressure on me and stress on me. And so I decided to structure my business in a way where I could work less and I can make more money. And that's why I love the online income. And Victoria, you can relate to this. You've transformed the way you do life, through what you've done on YouTube and, with your content. And these days I'm all about passive income. How can I get that passive income, get the most bang for my buck where I'm not sitting behind my computer? I love being out golfing. And when I'm out golfing, I make $2,000 off an online course while I'm out golfing, or I'm getting my hair done and a sale comes in, or my nails done, things like that. I get to do all those things during the week, which to me, I love that, because other people aren't out during the week doing those things. So for me, it was when I worked for other people, I never felt burnt out working for other people. I can tell you that. I didn't have the burnout until I was completely on my own, because I was trying to do everything. And then I volunteered for everything. If something needed to be done, I did it. And then I also started to cut back on that stuff. I still volunteer and I do things, but I don't do it at the level that I used to, because I don't want that to come at the expense of my health. And I don't want to if I find myself in stressful situations, like you guys know, this year has been busier for me than normal. And I've been working more hours than normal. And February and March were brutal. I was miserable and pissy and nasty. And I'm like, this reminds me of who I used to be. And I don't want to do this. So I had to set boundaries and set limits on what I was willing to take on with clients, and just adhere to those. So it was not a very long period of time that I suffered from that, but it was really, really bad. And so, that's, my experience without getting into all the details. I mean, I could probably do a 10-part podcast on that whole story and walk you all through it. But it's a real thing. I see a lot of people in our profession who are burned out and they're working for other people and they're burned out. I think that's sad. I think it's one thing to be burned out when you're doing it for yourself. Because Tony, you work crazy hours with what you do. I know that. But it's different when you're doing it for you versus someone else. If you're miserable and burnt out working for someone else, you definitely have to make a change. And if you're on your own, then it's a matter of just restructuring and delegating, which isn't always the easiest. I get it. There are certain things only I can do, certain things only Tony can do or Victoria can do. But it's trying to push those other things out, or maybe not taking everything on. I mean, I love making money, but I also like my sanity. And so I don't take everything that comes my way.
Yeah, Stacey, it's nice to no longer be at the part where you're burning out unless you've kind of almost scheduled it for yourself, where you're like, I put myself into a position right now where I know I took on too many projects and I might short term be completely miserable about it, but this was of my own design. What about you, Tony? What are some of the things that have caused you to burn out in the past? Like, what is it that has burnt you out? Do you have any stories about like the time you've been the most burnt out?
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll just say this. I am a chronic overachiever, a chronic workaholic. And I don't say this because it's a good thing. I struggle with this on a daily basis. It's an ongoing struggle. It is both my strength and my weakness. It has gotten me here and it will probably be my demise because it's very tough to balance all of the priorities that I have going on. I wear so many hats. I have 3 babies. I've got a 4-year-old, a 3-year-old, a 1-year-old. My son is autistic. He is nonverbal. So the challenges that I have just as a mother are enormous. I'm also a business owner, an entrepreneur. I'm a boss to my employees. I'm an advisor to physicians and attorneys. I'm an expert witness, so I'm accountable to the court and the many obligations that are, attached to that. I used to do a lot more on social media. I don't do as much now because that's an area that I've had to cut back on because I was getting so burnt out. So over time, these types of tendencies lead to chronic burnout. So for me, that's things like chronic email checking. Putting your email on your phone it's a curse. It's not a good thing. It's a good thing in that it's convenient and it's right there, but it's also very bad if you have no self-control and you're constantly checking and, trying to figure out what's going on. And so that's something, definitely chronic email checking. And I would say that started for me in like 2012. So since 2012, I've had my email on my phone and I've, habitually checked it. And so I'll go through periods where I'll get rid of the email application on my phone so that I can't access that all the time. I will, go through bouts where I used to have 2 separate lines where I had a work line and I had a personal line, and only the people that absolutely had to get a hold of me would have my personal line so that I could have some type of detachment. Another thing that contributes to burnout for me is too many meetings. I am an ambivert, but I'm more introvert dominated. So I thrive on people's energy when I'm around them, but it totally drains me. It's taxing. And so if like I'm at a conference or a meeting, if there's an opportunity for me to get away and kind of have some time to myself just to recharge, I will do that because too many meetings, too many people, it can, really cause a lot of burnout for me. Overextending myself with lots of challenging projects. So I don't like to do things that are cookie cutter and, things that are just out of the box. I'm the type of person, got to be challenged. So when a client comes to me, it's because they can't figure it out. They've exhausted all efforts. And so I'm there to kind of help guide them or, be the decision maker in the, conundrum that they can't figure out. I am constantly taking on these very, very tough projects. And I love it because it makes me very happy when the process is complete and I've figured out a quagmire, or, I've helped a provider go home earlier at the end of the day. I've helped, this organization build out this beautiful multi-specialty, multidisciplinary practice that's doing, let's say, a hybrid reimbursement model of taking concierge and insurance pay. Like, I set these things up. I go and negotiate with insurance companies on all of these, contracts to try to get providers increased rates. I work with a lot of attorneys on quitam matters, so people that are whistleblowers within an organization, and these are very sensitive things. These are highly confidential matters. So I just constantly overextend myself because I'm addicted to solving problems and building things. So that leads to a lot of burnout, because over time, although it's exciting, it really takes a toll on your mental health. It takes a lot of mental real estate to just keep constantly juggling these things and pivoting from, one day I could be in trial, the next I could be speaking at a conference, the next day I'm meeting with an entire board of executives, the next day it could be, teaching a class, the next day could be something else. So it's just constantly doing these very exciting things, but it does wear on you over time. Not knowing how to set boundaries. So if you are a people pleaser, if you're somebody that's like constantly saying yes because you don't want to disappoint people, that's going to lead you to chronic burnout. I was one of those people for a long time, much less now than I have in the past. I will absolutely say no. But it takes a progression, and it takes time and kind of knowing what your limits are to be able to get to a point where you're not constantly saying yes and taking on things that you really shouldn't take on. Another thing that I did, especially in corporate, when I worked in corporate, was I didn't take my vacations. I didn't take PTO. Like, I remember I had like the maximum hours of PTO for years, and I couldn't accrue any additional PTO because I could never take any time off because I was always overextended. And I liked to be the person in the organization that was just the go-to for everybody. And so, I was the only person that could go out and meet with these providers, and I had to, meet these deadlines. And so it was just like self-imposed. But you need to take your vacation, because not taking vacations, not taking dedicated time off is going to lead you to burnout. My final thought would be not celebrating your successes. Again, something I struggle with. The finish line is a constantly moving target. It's never going to be, when I get to this, I'm going to be happy. When I buy this, I'm going to be happy. When I get this fancy car, I'm going to be happy. When I get this title, I'm going to be happy. That's not the key to happiness. Money is not the key to happiness. None of that stuff is. But if you don't celebrate your wins, even the small ones, even the minute ones, you will get burned out, because that finish line just moves further and further, and you don't see all that you've achieved. So, I've talked about this before in my podcast. I have to take things that people say to me. I have to take awards and, places that I've been, and I have to put them up. I have to see them. I have to visualize them, because otherwise I forget, wow, like I've been on TV, I've, talked in front of all these judges, and I've done all these really cool things, but it doesn't feel real unless I can see it and I can touch it. So celebrate your wins, because if you don't, those things are going to lead to chronic burnout.
So I have to ask you, because you mentioned being on TV and stuff. So when you were on C-SPAN, we all know the government channel. Once upon a time, Tony was on C-SPAN. I'm like, what? When I saw there's a photo of Tony on C-SPAN. She was speaking to a group of people, and it was broadcast on C-SPAN, and I thought that was super cool.
Yeah, a long time ago.
We learned about her. We know she was a professional poker player. We learned that last episode. Now she's been on C-SPAN.
Tony, Tony, I have to say, when you said about PTO, that was something that really spoke to me because I remember how much I used to struggle so much when I was in management and I was newly divorced. I didn't have a lot of money. I had to hand in the keys to my mobile home because we couldn't afford to keep making the payments on it anymore. And I would cash out my PTO. They would allow me to just cash out a lot of my PTO. So I would not take my vacations. And then I would take the money that I cashed out of PTO and I'd take maybe like a 3-day weekend or something for myself. And I did that for so long. And I was told all the time, you need to take more days off. And I would tell my own freaking employees, you need to take more days off. But I could not escape for a little bit more. And part of it was because like I couldn't afford to, which I think is why now I've built myself into this life where like every other month I'm going on vacation because I'm like, I can do it now. And I'm making up for all the lost time that I had to sit in meetings with all these freaking directors. And they're like, I'm going on to vacation to Europe for 2 weeks with my husband, who's an executive at the bank. And we have all this money. I'm like, you know what? Now is my time. Now I'm going out on vacation.
Look at you doing it up.
But yeah, I've definitely dealt with my fair share of burnout, much like Tony and Stacy, I'm sure as well. Though you didn't specifically say it, like very high achieving, want to get to the next thing. I used to want to just move up that corporate ladder. I'm going to get the next credential. I'm going to get, the next position. And it took a while for me to realize that I was not meant for that lifestyle. I was not meant to work up the traditional roles where I go from supervisor to manager to director and I'm, watching the whole revenue cycle. I thought that's what I wanted and it was not. I've basically refused at this point to work in any sort of management positions because it has burnt me out so badly in the past. I was in a position where I was very heavily micromanaged. My boss was a nice person, but she admitted that she's like, I don't know how to manage you other than to micromanage you. And I would have lots of other people in the organization that would tell me like, oh, I love this person so much, but good Lord, I would never want to work for them. And I was the one that was working for them. And it was extremely difficult. I didn't realize quite how difficult it was until a day that one of my employees walked into my office and said, I know, Victoria, that this is none of my business, but I see the way you're being treated here and it's not okay. It was tough. I basically not only was micromanaged, taking on too much. I didn't recognize some things in myself. Like when the last day that I left, I remember my boss saying to me, Victoria, like, I just don't understand what's going on. She's like, you can manage a couple of things really, really well, like super well. But then when I have to put a lot of things on you, like you completely fall apart. Like you have no idea what the heck you're doing. And it wasn't until, the wheels were starting to turn then, but it wasn't until my daughter started in kindergarten. And they said, oh, well, Lizzie's having so many attention problems. And I'm like, oh, okay, well, maybe she doesn't have autism. Maybe she just has like ADHD. So we should get her screened. So they're like, okay, here's the assessment form. And I picked up this assessment form and I looked at it and I'm like, why is this describing me as a child? And eventually I did go down the rabbit hole and found out that like I had ADHD and that's why I sucked so bad at management, was because like I could manage a couple of things. And then when it got onto like compounding, like everything was just getting scrambled in there. I literally couldn't pay attention to everything. So I've just thrived so much when I've gone into more of this creative role where I'm working on my more preferred tasks that I have hyper focus on, that I'm really interested in, where I get to be more creative, but also do the technical stuff and kind of like set my own day for myself. But yeah, when I start loading up my calendar, not even just with a lot of things, but like too many different tasks that I have to toggle, it just absolutely just burns me completely out. My last management job, it actually got to the point where I was having like horribly intense headaches. And I knew I had like a breakdown. And I didn't want to say anything to my doctor. So she's like, "Oh, maybe you're just having migraines." I'm like, "Yeah, that's probably it. I'm probably just having migraines," because she worked for the organization that I was employed at. And I didn't want to like, I was like too scared to say anything. So when I am not opposed to keeping a full calendar, but when it gets to be, I could never do what Tony does. I could never switch from like talking to the board of directors to being on C-SPAN to being to being in court the next day. It's funny. I was just thinking recently about how when I was leaving my last job, and Tony and I were kind of having like little behind the scenes conversations. She's like, "You can come work for me. You could do like expert witness work." And then I watched this Depp Heard trial and I'm like, "No, I don't ever want to be a subject matter expert on the witness stand about anything ever," because that was horrible.
I think everybody kind of has a better context of what an expert is now because of that trial, right?
There were certain times where someone would come on and I'd be like, "Oh, I could maybe do this if this guy's doing it." But then the others would come on and I'd be like, "No, I don't, no, I don't want to be grilled about all of my credentials, everything I've done in my life. Like this is not, I don't know how the hell you do it, Tony. I really don't."
It's awful. But did you see that guy? Sorry, totally off topic. Did you see that guy and what he did with his face during the trial?
Like,
What not to do as an expert witness? Also,
so what kind of experts do they have? I mean, in this trial, I mean, are we talking like a canine fecal matter expert in this trial, given what we learned? Who's testifying about that?
Some of them were so bizarre. There was one person who was an expert witness on like social media trends, and they were talking about the hashtags in the case and how many, bad hashtags were trending that were bad to Amber Heard. So they're like literally in court reading them like as slowly as they possibly can to her and the jury. And they're like, "Yeah, so hashtag Amber Heard is a hoax. Hashtag Amber Turd. Hashtag." So sorry. Like, how do you get to the point where you're the expert witness on hashtag Amber Turd? Like, I don't know. So while we're sitting here laughing and enjoying ourselves, it might be a good time to talk about self-care, because we hear a lot about, "Oh, well, you need to take care of yourself." And then there's all of these people that have this variety of things like, "Oh, well, sometimes self-care is just being able as a mom to take a shower by yourself." But like, let's be real, like taking a shower by yourself is not going to cut it when you're like stressed to all high hell. Although I hear two of my friends may have recently gone out and gotten some nice self-care for themselves. Ladies, who would like to talk about that one?
That was actually one of my self-care tips. So Victoria decided to live in a cold, ridiculous place outside of Florida. So she was invited, but she didn't come. So anyways, Stacy and I actually went to the Ritz-Carlton, which is one of the top 10 spas in the United States, for a self-care day. Like, self-care to me was, that was the ultimate self-care, right? Like, unplug, get pampered.
That was amazing. Amazing. Best experience ever.
It was. Oh my gosh. Tell them what we did.
So we just went for it. We just said, "You know what? YOLO, let's go for it." So we started out the morning with massages. We got the 80-minute massage. We went as big as we could. 80-minute massage, 80-minute facial. After the facial, we do the pedicure. And then we sat and had a nice lunch. I mean, that was such a fantastic experience. I was a little surprised though. I've been to other spas before. That place was so busy and it was crawling with so many people. That's one heck of an operation that I've never seen at the spa level. And also, I don't know, your experience with other spas, but whenever I'm sitting around on my robe in a waiting area, I'm only around other women. And these were men and women in the waiting area together. And I'm like, that's a little, I get it because the guys are there with the women. They're there as couples. I didn't see any solo guys there, enjoying the spa on their own. They were there with their significant others. But I'm like, this is kind of weird for me that I've not had this experience before. Because you're not looking your most fabulous. Obviously, you go to the spa pretty much stripped down, no makeup or anything because you're prepared. But I mean, that was just such like a great day. I mean, so Victoria texted us and told us that she hated us when we were at the spa. And so we texted her back and we said, well, you'll just have to come with us next time and do this with us. So yeah, I thought Tony needed it more than I did. I mean, I had been working a little bit more, but I don't have the kids. I don't have all those other pressures that she does. But I'm like, Tony, for you, it must have been heaven. I mean, to unplug for like a whole day and just, experience all of that. It was amazing. Highly recommend.
It was heaven on earth. It was so nice.
Watch our negotiations episode about how to make more money so you can pay for days at the Ritz-Carlton spa. It's totally worth it.
Yeah, I feel like it inspired me to like level up, like I need to get my bag like on that level where people are like driving in with Lamborghinis and like, like these just lavish lifestyles, and going to the Ritz spa is what they do all the time. It's not like it's not like a treat. So yeah, it was amazing. It was glorious. So my idea of real self-care is just being able to completely unplug for the day. Obviously, it looks different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different idea of what self-care is to them. Like Victoria said, taking a shower or taking a nap, it's sad that that would be your form of self-care. And if it is, then, you've got to start somewhere. And I've certainly been in those seasons of my life. I just had a baby a year ago. And I remember, it was very, very difficult to have a baby and go through postpartum. And I have 2 other kids and running a business. And it was really tough. It was a tough, I would say, 5 months postpartum. I was really struggling. So taking a nap during that time was like a real treat to me. But yeah, you've got to start somewhere. I think for me, completely unplugging, having minimal responsibility is really important for me as far as self-care, because I have so many decisions and very not easy decisions to make. So I get a lot of decision fatigue. So having a mental brain break on some of those things is a form of self-care to me. Another thing that I like to do is, watch an episode of like the Kardashians, or, like pick your favorite trash TV. Like I like to watch something that takes my mind off of the very, very serious and technical things that I have to focus on. And it takes something like that to get my mind off of what I do every day. And I think, really try to focus on what brings you joy. So I know that sounds really trite, but it's true. And for somebody like me who is a workaholic, like I kid you not, if I'm not doing mom life, like I will work all the time, every day, every weekend. Like that's just who I am, because when you love what you do, you feel like you're not working, although you are working. And so that kind of compounds over time. So as a workaholic, it's, hard for me to kind of figure out, okay, what brings me joy outside of working and, helping people and pursuing my passion. And so you've got to really hone in on what is it that makes you happy? What do you truly find joy in? Is it watching trash TV or, reading some gossip blog or trolling social media, like whatever it is, that you find joy in, because there are a lot of trolls out there that clearly have nothing better to do in their life than troll other people. Focus on that, because self-care looks different for everybody. And I've said this before, but I don't think there's a such thing as work-life balance. I really don't. There's no perfect solution. It looks different for everybody. And a lot of people ask me, well, how do you do it all? How do you get it all done? And I tell everybody the same thing. I don't. If you see me at this meeting, if you see me, crushing it in my business, it's because I'm neglecting other areas. And to Stacy's point, where she talks about her health and how her health is what ultimately, determined her course moving forward. That's the end result of chronic burnout. There's no way around it. And there's nothing glamorous about it. And you really, really need to focus on self-care and setting boundaries and being able to avoid burnout as much as possible.
I think one of the best forms of self-care, and you touched on this and what you were commenting on earlier, and you just brought it up again, the setting boundaries and the saying no. The best thing that you can do for yourself is learn to say no to things. You do not have to do everything that you are asked to do. And that was something that I struggled with for a very long time, all through my 20s and into my 30s. If someone came to me and asked me to do something, I'd say, yeah, sure, I'll do it. Some things I would volunteer for, other things I would be appointed or elected. Oh, we want you to do this. And like you, Tony, I have that personality, that type A, hyper driven. I like the challenge. I like to see the finished product. This is the accomplishment at the end. And for a while that worked, and that was like a payoff. But then when you hit that point where you're just constant and just miserable and like, it was not a good space to be in. And then even before the health issues, I would say I already started trying to pull back on certain things prior to that and saying no to things. And when I first started saying no to people, they were shocked that I said no, because this was the thing. If you need this done and you want it done and you need it done right and on time, ask Stacy to do it and it'll get done. And busy people always get more stuff to do, like the ones who are a productive busy, not a busy for the sake of being busy, but you know what I mean? People tend to seek you out then to do more because you have that reputation of getting it done well and on time. And then and people would say, oh, but come on, Stacy, you do it so well. You do such a great job. I'm like, flattery is not going to do this for you. I'm still telling you no. I don't care if you're going to flatter me. And it took a while for people to adjust to me saying no. And so it kind of started before the health issues. And then eventually when I came out of that, and then just in business and in life, I was very good at setting boundaries. I know what my limit is. I'm not going to go past this limit. On the rare occasion I do start to go past that limit, those old ways start to creep back in again. And I'm like, I don't like this. And I will like, boom, I'll wrap up what I'm doing and I'll shut it down. And like Victoria talked about managing employees. Now, for years, in the busiest part of my business, I had a lot of people working for me. I had a whole team of 1099s, and managing people is a royal pain in the ass. I'm just going to say it. It is, because you are dealing with so many different personalities. And so you can't deal with everybody the same way. And when you're the business owner, it's different than being an employee at a company and managing employees, because now you as the business owner are caught between your clients and the people who are working for you. And you're trying to find that balance of keeping your employees happy and also meeting the needs of your clients and keeping them happy. And your employees don't have that loyalty to your clients. They have, they'll come in, and when you're dealing with 1099s, we can't control them. They might say, hey, Stacy, I'm going to work 20 hours this week. And then they only end up working 5. And now I've planned everything accordingly. And now I'm 15 hours short. And now how do we fill the gap and get this work done to meet the deadline? Things like that that happen are just very frustrating. People dropping the ball, and then you have to answer to the client why something, doesn't get done, and then finding qualified people and retaining qualified people. And so I just hit a point where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to do these big contracts anymore, these big projects anymore. I want to keep this more self-contained, where I'm consulting and I'm doing smaller volume, because that's just stress I don't want to have to deal with. If I have something planned for Friday and somebody drops the ball and they're not working on Friday, I don't want to have to drop what I'm doing to run in and fix that. I'm going to be PO'd all day long doing it, and I'm going to have to put aside what I had planned. And I'm like, I don't want to do that. I want to plan something. Like when I put personal stuff on my schedule, it stays on my schedule. I schedule work around my personal schedule. When you have people working for you, you don't have that ability, or, I never fully 100% go on vacation. When I go away, I have to stay connected to a certain degree, but it's much easier to walk away. And Victoria, you know this, and go away for a week when it's just you and you've met your obligations and you've worked around all your obligations, versus leaving people behind to do stuff. You're still having to be involved in that. You can't, I feel like it's much easier, and it sounds weird to people, to completely turn off being the business owner, versus I can turn off more, not 100%, but I feel like I can turn off more as the solo entrepreneur than I could if I had a bunch of people working for me. Like that's kind of how I view that, because then I have control of the whole thing and I control my schedule, and I only put on my schedule. Again, I put personal stuff first and then I schedule business stuff around it, which is a luxury. And I've worked to get there. It didn't happen overnight. I mean, when people hear me like, oh, it must be nice, I'm like, I put in a lot of hours for many years and did a lot of things. So you may have to do it initially, but then it's knowing your limits and knowing your boundaries and sticking to them, and don't let anybody push you, push against those boundaries. Some people have trouble with boundaries and they don't want to respect them. And that's where you have to stand up for yourself and just say, this is the boundary. I'm saying no, and I'm not going to make an exception. Because if you start to make an exception, like, what is it? The one saying about like today's favor becomes tomorrow's obligation. So I tell people to be very careful. Or like you mentioned the cell phone and unplugging the cell phone. Do you know I never give clients my cell phone number, like ever? My cell phone is for my personal use. My clients have my office number. Now, the only clients that have my personal cell phone number are ones that I am friendly with and social with. And that's why they have my cell phone number. It's not for business purposes. It's because we golf together, or we hang out together, we go grab a bite to eat or something like that. And those are the kind of things you have to do, because with the devices and the electronic age, that's a tough thing to disconnect. It's nice, it's convenient, it allows you to be away and still stay connected, but what's that limit? Sometimes on the weekends, if I'm going to do something I want to be bothered, I just shut off the email so it doesn't hit my phone, and then I don't go look at it until Monday. Sometimes you have to do that if you're really getting to that point where, okay, I've had enough. And it's hard. It doesn't come easy when you have the personality types that we do, but it's necessary, and you can learn to do it. If I could learn to do it, the obsessive, crazy alcoholic. I've never been an alcoholic. Workaholic. I don't even drink. That was not a Freudian slip. Tony knows we hang out. They come in and offer us alcohol. I'm like, no, I'm not a drinker. That's funny. Workaholic. That was always me. That was my thing. My addiction was work. Now it's shopping. That's like an addiction. But, anyway. That was so weird that I said that when I went to say workaholic. Because people who know me know that it's like the furthest thing like from it, which is why it's hilarious.
You're a shopaholic, a shoeaholic.
I bought so much stuff this past week on sale that like boxes are showing up, and I'm just like, oh, look, I don't even remember what's in this. This is going to be a surprise. But yeah, I like that we talked about how there are different seasons in your life, and sometimes you go through things that, even though we're telling you now don't do this, like sometimes you have to kind of go through those periods in life. Saying no is super, super hard at first. Like, you don't want to say no to people. You don't want to seem like, they're like, oh, they want me to do it. I don't want to seem like a big old bitch that I'm telling them, no, I can't do it for them. But like, it gets easier after a while. Like, it does get easier once you get more used to just telling people like, hey, I only have so many hours in the day. I'd like to do this for you. Like, I can't. Like, your mental health is worth way more than being able to pack your schedule with a bunch of stuff for people. As far as my self-care, since I can't go to the Ritz and get massages, some days I really just enjoy kind of like the trash TV that Tony said, but for some reason, some days I just really need to like stay up late. Like, I love like one of those days where I can just stay up till like 2 a.m. and watch Netflix, because usually I'm kind of in bed because I have to get my kid ready. So when I can have those days where I'm like, I'm just going to sit here on the couch with my junk food, and I'm going to watch, what Stranger Things or whatever on Netflix, like that is just like the best thing, just to stay up late and sleep in and just have, oh my gosh, that personal time. But unfortunately, I did that a lot during the pandemic. I was having too much sedentary time, and I was having too much junk food. And now I have to do damage control. I'm still working on damage control from this pandemic. And now fitness has become a prioritization for me, which is good, because some of my blood work and stuff was not looking good, and it's almost back down to normal levels now. So I struggled too, even with just prioritizing my fitness, and I had to figure out what worked for me, because I'm someone like, if I join, what is it, Planet Fitness, where it's $10 a month, and I wake up in the morning and I don't feel like going, I'm going to be like, whatever, it's only $10. Like, I'm not going. So I had to basically hire a personal trainer because it's first off going to hit me in the pocketbook. I don't want to lose out on that money that I'm paying him. I want to get what I'm worth. And second, he's expecting me to be there at a certain time. And if I don't show up, I know I'm going to be getting a text message like, hey, Victoria, you missed leg day. What the hell is going on? And the nice thing about being a business owner is I can do that at the non-favorable times. So when everyone else is working at like 9, 10 o'clock in the morning, I can go to my trainer and I can go to my fitness classes and not have to worry about it. And I don't feel bad or lazy about it because, you see so many of these gurus out here like, I'm up at 5 in the morning and then I go and jog a mile. And I'm like, well, I'm no less because I get up at 8 a.m. and go out at 9. Like it's the same thing, just at different hours. So having to prioritize that has really helped me out just in the past few months. Yeah, still working on a lot of different things there. So that's been a lot of my self-care methods. And, right now I'm in a season where I can go on vacation a lot. When I didn't have that money, when I didn't have a lot to invest, I still did a lot of stuff. Like I was still, I only have one kid, so it's not as hard to drag around one kid as it is 3 kids.
And 3 kids under 5. Oh my gosh, that's like crazy.
But it's, there's so many cool free activities now these days. Like Halloween has always been the hot spot for me. Like I had nothing in my calendar on October's because I knew that like basically every evening I was going to take my kid out to somewhere was having trunk or treat or someone was having safe trick or treat or there was a block party going on. And I'm like, get your costume on, Lizzie, and get your bag. We're going. So there was always something that I could do, that I could enjoy, that I could kind of bring a little bit more life into what I was doing. And, I've always enjoyed just kind of like hanging out with my kids. It's fun how she's kind of transformed now that she's kind of like growing up and gone through puberty, and she's kind of like becoming like this like tiny bestie. And she doesn't, always get the things that I'm doing, but she just kind of like enjoys spending time with me. She's like, yeah, I'll hop on the plane and go with you, Mom. Like, whatever. If I can sit there and play on my phone and spend time with you, like, I don't care. But it's, we talked a lot about balance, and there is a huge amount of balancing of your time. And when you're a hot commodity and you only have so many hours in the day, it becomes a struggle trying to figure out like, is this something I can take because I'm interested in it? Is it something that, I need to take it because it's going to be good money for me and I have to because I need money to live? And like what you're going to say no to. Because sometimes you get offers for good things, but you just can't fit it into your schedule, and you have to prioritize like what are the things I'm going to take and what are the things that I'm not going to take. I've kind of like recently, when I'm working on projects, kind of almost ranked them based off of like how interested am I in doing this project, first off, how much money am I going to make doing this project, and then how much time is it going to take me, like how much time is this from start to finish kind of am I going to have to invest, and like trying to find that sweet spot between like, is there something that maybe is I'm really interested in, it's going to make me a lot of money and it's not going to take me a lot of time. Like how do I figure out where those are? And it's tough because, you want to have that extra time, but you also want to take on some of those things and balancing, oh, I know you guys want me, but I'm going to not do this, and this just because you want me to. In regards to like the cell phone usage, I still have my emails come to my phone, but some of them just aren't getting responded to. Like if it's someone who's just emailing me from my YouTube channel, sometimes they're just not something I have time to respond to, or there's something that I kind of have standard responses for some people. Like I get so many of the same questions that I have kind of like these standard responses. They're in a Google Drive and I just copy and paste them, like for, hey, Victoria, I want to get into medical coding. How do I get started? Okay, well, here's the playlist that I have on how you get started. Hey, Victoria, I need to find a job. Okay, well, here's all the stuff I already put together about how to find a job. So some of the things that I can commonly respond to, I kind of tackle that way. But recently I had an organization that wanted to pick me up for some projects, and it was for like video sponsorships. And I'm like, hey, I can plug you in for my video sponsorships, but that is going to take away from this other thing that I have to do where I'm compensated quite a bit more. So while I would love to, like, it's just financially not a good decision for me to do that. You know, and even things like, I have a lot of people that'll say, oh, Victoria, I love the way you teach on YouTube. Can you tutor me? Can I? Yes. What I would have to charge you though for tutoring, because you would be taking that time away from other projects that are much more profitable, it wouldn't be worth it. Like, it would be this astronomical amount that I would have to charge you for tutoring services. You could probably get a better tutor somewhere else from like tutors.com or Wyzen.com for a much more reasonable rate than what you could pay for me. It's kind of like asking, I don't know, like your lawyer for advice on something that, you don't really need a lawyer advice for, but you have to pay them the lawyer rate because that's what they get compensated for.
In my business, what I do, this is like my motto, and some people look at me like, how dare you say something like this? It is my goal. My motto is to work as little as possible for the most money possible. And
Right.
That's how I prioritize things, because I don't want to work all these hours. So my goal is always, how do I work less and make more? And that seems arrogant and it seems crazy when people say that. And I probably would have thought the same thing years ago when I was the workaholic. But now, because of technology, I mean, anybody can start a side hustle. Like, you start there, you start doing something, that you're passionate about, and you can grow it. And, I know people out there thinking, well, that's nice for you guys. Must be nice because you can go to the Ritz and you can do this and that and all these things and do these things during the week. When I used to go to the gym, I would go to the gym at about 2:00, 2:30 in the afternoon, and we'll go with my trainer because no one was there. I was the only person there because it was during the week when, people were working. And I like that. But those opportunities are available, I feel, to everyone. If you find, I feel like everybody has a sweet spot. Like, everybody has some type of skill, some type of gift that they have that they can give to the world, where they can help other people and they can turn it into a business. If you're a medical coder, maybe it revolves around medical coding. But maybe you're a medical coder that has other talents and you have some big business opportunity doing something else outside of medical coding. That's a possibility. But I see so many people making a ton of money, like solopreneurs who have cut the ties with the full-time employers and are working part-time hours and making way more money than they've ever made. And that's me. And Victoria, that's you, with like how you're working. Tony's still working like a crazy person, like a lot of hours, but she'll transition eventually. She's the youngest of the three, so she'll get there. I have confidence at some point in time.
We have different business models, so.
But there are so many people who have found a way to do that, and it's so inspiring and it's so encouraging. There is a guy that I follow on LinkedIn, Justin Welsh, and he is a big influencer, when it comes to solopreneurs and starting a business, and he shares his story and his system and how he's built this business. And this guy now is probably making over $1 million a year, when he just started a few years ago on LinkedIn. And he does a lot of online courses that he's making money from. But when he does consulting, I think to consult with him one-on-one, he charges like $1,000 an hour. Because I'm like, I want to talk to Justin. I'm like, well, I'm not paying $1,000 an hour, and he's out of my, price range there. But this was someone who got tired of the rat race, wanted to have more control over the quality of, their life. And so he doesn't work, full time. He controls how many consulting clients he takes at $1,000 an hour. You don't need a lot if you're charging $1,000 an hour. And then he has the passive income coming in from the online course. So, I mean, the model's been proven, all across industries, that it's doable. So it's definitely food for thought for people who are out there listening, who say, I want that kind of life. I want that. You can do it. It's available to you.
How about you, Tony? How do you balance, like, when you've got all of these projects and limited time, like, how do you handle what gets prioritized and what you have to reject out and say, no, I can't do that this time?
Yeah, it's a juggling act. So I filter through, so first you've got to look at defining your priorities. So what's most important to you? How do you want to spend your time? And for me, because I have employees, I have to delegate. So I have to constantly take things off my plate and give them to other people. And for a long time, it really was a struggle for me, especially early on in my management career, because I always felt like when I would take stuff off my own plate that like I was the best person to do that, which is like so ridiculous, right? Like, oh, I'm taking something away from myself to give to somebody else. And it really was a struggle. I don't struggle with that now at all because I try to look at the task as, okay, I'm creating a path for another person. I'm giving another person an opportunity to do something really cool and exciting and challenging so that they can feel more confident in their decision making, so that they can be more decisive. So I have to delegate. So I look at my priorities, whether it be that week, that month, that quarter. As a business owner, I look at things on a quarterly basis. How do I prepare for the next quarter? I've got to make payroll. I've got obligations that have to be made. And when you have your own business, even if you do things the right way, even if you get clients, even if you do the work, even if you have a team of people behind you, there's still things that happen that are out of your control. Maybe that client, they are an insurance company and they process invoices very slow. So it takes them 3 months to pay an invoice. That's not uncommon. So you've got to be prepared for those types of things. So what I do is I look at the priorities, I delegate what I can. And that has been a progression. I also try to automate things as much as I can. There's certain things that I can't automate that I wish I could automate. But like you said, Victoria, having that Google Doc or that, doc where you just kind of have these canned responses. When I was doing my podcast, I would always direct people to this episode or, this podcast, because I had already built a library of resources. You have this expansive library of resources. I mean, you've been doing videos for, 2 years now. So you've got all of these resources to send your folks to, and you get the same questions over and over. I've also learned to say no. I think, Stacy, you have inspired a lot of people because you come out of the gate with no. I tell people no, and I'm proud to tell people no. And, some people don't realize that you can say no and that it is an option for you. So I do say no. I don't take on every single thing. I try to look at, what comes in and is that something that is exciting for us? Is it something that we want to get involved in? I know in our business, we're on the higher level. So we're more of advisors to medical practices and physicians and hospitals and attorneys. We're in that advisory role. We don't do outsourced coding. We don't do outsourced billing. Those are things that we're not that's not our business model. But I have people come to me every day and say, hey, I need you to do my billing. Hey, I need you to do my coding. And it's like, that's not my business model. That's not what we do. I know somebody that can help you, so let me refer you to them. And so developing a network of experts is really critical. That's, one of the things that has allowed me to really elevate myself in the profession is if I can't do it, I know somebody that can. And I typically have a great relationship with them to where I can call them up and say, hey, I've got this, issue. Can I run it by you? Can I refer this client to you? Actually, Sean Weiss was talking about this recently in an episode. He did a podcast episode where people asked him, hey, why do you bring on other consultants? Why do you bring other consultancies on your podcast? Isn't doctors management and the consulting business? And he said, this is not my competition. These are my colleagues. And, the whole goal here is to have these great conversations and these engaging dialogues so that you can get to know your colleagues, so that you can develop that really expansive network. Because, if you have a network, a Rolodex of people that you can contact and say, hey, I've got a project for you. Hey, I've got a client for you. That makes you look good to your client. And it also helps your colleague out, and it just kind of builds your authority. So I've worked on really developing that expansive referral network, figuring out how to work smarter, not harder. So, yes, I can do these very, very complicated projects and I can write these, 50-page reports, but I could also do this other thing that takes me maybe 20 minutes that I could charge, $1,200 for, and I could do 12 of those instead of doing one big project that, I might make $10,000 on that takes 2 months. So it's really that balance of figuring out where you can get the most juice out of the squeeze and how to leverage your resources. Stacy mentioned this earlier, time blocking. So you got to book in your personal time. For a long time when I worked in corporate, I would only book business stuff. I would never schedule in my personal stuff. And so I would just think, oh yeah, when I have time to do this, I can go to the doctor, or I can go, to this appointment. And there was never time. There's always something to do, and you're always going to take on more as you grow and progress. My final thought is, this is something that's helped me a lot, especially as a mom, is to just be fully present in the moment. So if you're working on business stuff, be in the moment. If I'm in mom mode, I don't have my phone. I'm not looking at, emails. I'm not distracted. And when I do things with my kids, I'm 100% fully present. When I'm with my client, I'm 100% fully present. So I try to be fully present in whatever I'm doing so that time is focused and productive, and I'm not spilling over into other areas of my life.
Yeah. I'd just like to add one comment briefly, like something that I've noticed that's made a difference for me, and I've fallen off on like one of the things badly. Victoria talked about exercise. That actually is a tremendous help. Like myself, what I have noticed is when I exercise, I feel better. In general, my mood, it actually is a mood elevator, and it kind of, I'm of a certain age, so hormones with women are all out of whack when you start getting to, and when I talk to women of my age demographic, ladies, which you are not, they say, oh, just wait, it's just starting for you with some of these, hormonal changes and swings. When I eat healthy and I exercise, I don't have those issues. I've noticed that when I do both of those together. And then if I'm like exercising, but I'm eating like crap, that doesn't help. I need to have the two combined. But diet is huge, because I'm one of those people, I eat healthy for the most part, but then when I fall off the wagon and I binge and I know I'm going to feel like garbage, like I can get away with one day of eating whatever I want and then I'm going to be okay. But when Stacy starts to hit day 2 and day 3, and then you feel, and I'm not drinking enough water, the best thing you can do for yourself, simple, to look better and feel better, is drink water. And I hate drinking water, so I have to force myself to do it. And it's those simple things that you can do to feel better. Exercise, don't go to the gym for an hour or 2 hours. Go for a 15-minute walk. If I get really stressed out or aggravated, I'll just like put on my sneakers and I'll go for a walk and clear my head, listen to some good music, and do that. It's just those simple things. But food, nobody mentioned eating healthy, but oh my gosh, what a difference that makes in how you feel. And we work in the medical profession, so we see it. Everybody wants a pill to solve their problem. The pill is the quick fix. Even though people see the effects of taking all the pills long term, it means more pills and so on and so forth. Me, I'm like, don't put a pharmaceutical in your body if you can avoid it. I'm like one of those people. So I do natural, supplementation and things. And, over the weekend, the holiday weekend, I got to say, I kind of ate horribly. I ate bad stuff because I hadn't had it in a while. I've been eating healthy. And then I ate something that I reacted to, and my face broke out and was all horrible. It's covered with makeup now. It's better. But I'm like, the results of that facial that I had a couple weeks ago are now ruined because of something I ate that I knew I shouldn't eat. So it helps you feel better. It helps you look better. And that's a huge thing in my life. And I need to stay disciplined because I know what's on the other side of a few days of that. And then I'm like, why did I even do it? Was it worth it? So that's very important. And then to keep your stress levels down so you don't have the health issues. That's the other thing. So mine wasn't brought on by stress. Some of you know my story. I had mold in my house that was making me sick. So stressed or not, that's going to be a problem. But the stress didn't help. It just compounded the problem because your immune system is broken down. So that would be my final piece of advice in self-care. Diet and exercise are absolutely huge. The older you get, the more important that becomes. I've learned that now that I'm pushing close to 50. I wish I would have had better habits when I was younger, because now I'm like, oh, I really hate this. Like, I envy those people who love going to the gym and it's their passion and they enjoy it and they can't live without it. I'm like, That is so not me. I'd rather sit on the couch and watch the trash TV than go and do something like this to get my release and my escape.
Yeah, I think one of the big things for me too has been just defining what my largest goals are. Like my biggest goal is I just want to make cool content that helps people out and, have a flexible schedule. So if I just have those things identified, I can kind of look at something that I'm potentially considering doing and going, okay, is that really feeding this goal? Or is this going against the ultimate thing that I have set and I have established for what I want in my life? So there you go. Very simple ways to avoid getting
That's a great way to evaluate decisions that people overlook. Anytime you're faced with a decision, yes or no, do I do this? Ask yourself, is this moving me closer to where I want to be and closer to my goals? Or is it moving me further away? Or is it keeping me stagnant? Those are easy questions to answer, and that should determine whether or not you give it a yes or no. It doesn't need to be this complex decision-making process, but you have to be clear on your goals before you have the ability to do that. But that's why it is so important to get a clear idea of where you want to be and then take this. And that's what I do. I don't involve myself in stuff that does not fit that picture, that I've created for myself. And you've done a great job of doing that. I mean, Victoria gets a ridiculous number of opportunities that come her way to do things because of her YouTube fame. And she doesn't take on everything, and she has to weigh those things. Like she says, she has a great evaluation process. You do, as far as, what you take on and, what you get involved with. And that's really a key. And I think people are so busy though, and so caught up in things, they don't take time to think about that. Because do you want to be in the same place you are today 5 years from now? Most people would probably say no. But for most people, 5 years from now, they're probably going to be in a similar place, which is unfortunate. So it's about taking time for that reflection, and that self-evaluation, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. So those are some of our tips in identifying and avoiding burnout when you are working and how to keep yourself sane. So I hope you found them very, very helpful. Now, don't forget to give us a 5-star rating and review. And if you're watching this on YouTube, a like and a subscribe. And we will see you next time for the next confession.
Thank you for tuning in to Coding Consultant Confessions with Tony Elholmes, Stacey Buck, and Victoria Mole. Unfiltered, unedited, unapologetic. Connect with the Coding Consultant Confessions podcast on YouTube, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Simply search for Coding Consultant Confessions on any of these platforms to connect and engage with Tony, Stacey, and Victoria.